Good morning. Good morning. Of course, first question. How is your year of promoting your mental health and wellness going? I'll give you a minute to think about it and then you can let me know. Okay, great. On to the purpose and reason for the video today. And it has a lot to do with a question that is always coming into my LinkedIn inbox, my Facebook inbox, my Instagram. And the question is, how do I get into the KDF? And that's cool. I mean, this country has given us everything. And to have the privilege to be of service to it it's a privilege beyond measure. So the questions are usually fast and furious, and then some are a bit ambiguous, and others downright demand that I do this video so that I may stop answering the same question over and over again. So once the video is out there, then you can be able to tap into it, and hopefully I can address some of the questions that are asked that leave me wondering whether somebody has actually looked at the ad. Yeah. So let's begin. I'll be reading from the internet, what is there, what is available to everybody. I'll make a bit of interpretation based on the questions that have been asked over time, and hopefully it will provide good information for whoever needs it. So it says you have to be a Kenyan citizen with no dual citizenship. So essentially it means that you must have a national ID. You must be registered as a Kenyan, okay? And you cannot belong to another country as well as belong to Kenya. So you must have only Kenyan citizenship. And therefore that means you must also be above 18 years old, because that's just when you can get an ID. The second one says that you must be in possession of a valid Kenyan national ID, which is what I just said. And you must have 4 copies of your national ID. Your PIN certificate will be required. PIN certificate has to do with the whole Kenya Revenue Authority, what can I call it, alignment. And you can pick those up. Nowadays, it's not a big deal. I remember when I picked my PIN, we used to have to go to, they're called KRA towers in Nairobi, and there used to be long lines, and you'd have to queue, then you'd find the guy has made a mistake, I don't know what, but those days are over. Nowadays, it's like so easy peasy, you can be able to access it. Then it says that you have to be between the ages of 18 and 26. That is for general service officers. And so the question always is, what is a general service officer, right? So a general service officer is just that you are going to undergo basic military training for the purposes of coming to perform general and not specific or specialized, essentially, duties in the military, okay? So whether you get into the Army, the Air Force, or the Navy, you're basically going to do the duties that a soldier is meant to do, okay? Across the board, that is. In the military, it is said that specialization is for insects. Okay? Then, so it says ages between 18 to 26 years old for general service officer cadets. So the acronym is GSO. Then general duty recruits, and that, okay, so it's very important also to make this distinction clear. A general service officer cadet at the end of their basic training will be commissioned and will receive a presidential parchment, and they will wear their ranks on top of their shoulders, right? so they won't wear them on the side of their arms. So that's a very important distinction, that a general service officer cadet will become a commissioned officer. Okay, so a general duty recruit, that person will not be commissioned, and that person will conduct general duties as a non-commissioned officer. And then we have general duty recruits and tradesmen and women. So tradesmen and women essentially is those who come in with a specialization. You know, like the military needs plumbers, it needs sign writers, it needs janitors, it needs, you know, people who have some form of specialization that they have acquired as civilians before they join the military. That is tradesmen and women. So you come in with that you've qualified and studied for and you have a certificate for, and then that's what you bring into the military. Okay? Then we have general duty recruits and tradesmen and women with certificates / government trade tests. So do I need to explain government trade tests? Let's say you have a place that you're working on, maybe you're doing carpentry, you're doing welding, like what you're hearing out there, and it is NEC examined. The Kenya National Examination Council examines that particular course. So that's basically what it means to have a government trade test. Okay, you'll find that these are usually gotten from these institutions. I forget what they're called. Why am I forgetting what they're called? But it's like back then they used to be called polytechnics. Polytechnics don't exist anymore, but yeah, those institutions that specialize in skill that you get certified in. So it also says that for specialist officers, they should not be above 30 years old. So of course, the question is, who is a specialist officer? A specialist officer is, for example, somebody like myself, where I joined the military having studied psychology, and the military was in the need of psychologists, right? Or psychologists, yeah. And therefore, that was how I managed to become a specialist officer. So a specialist officer will basically, of course, undergo the basic training. Everybody undergoes the basic training. I mean, if you have the uniform on, yeah, you have undergone basic training. So what happens in this case is that, and this is what is so interesting, so the commissioning for specialists, at least during my time, happened before basic training. Of course, we didn't know what that meant then, you know. Oh, if only we had known how different basic training would have been, I suppose. So after basic training, what happens for specialist officers is that you now get to deploy to the unit you've been assigned to your workstation, to do what you specialized in university. That's the service you come to provide in the military as a commissioned officer. Okay, so what are we talking about so far? We have two categories of individuals who are commissioned officers, meaning they have a presidential parchment and they wear their ranks at the top, and you know, there's a whole ranking system to do with that probably I'll get into at some point, or maybe not. I don't know. You guys will let me know if you care to know what they are. So you have two categories: the general service officers and the specialist officers. Then you have the general duty recruits and tradesmen and women. So I hope that is clear. So number 4 goes on to say that you must be physically and medically fit in accordance with the KDF standards. So the KDF standards are basically stipulated in part, you know, as we go along. but essentially you're supposed to not have any body, physical or mental condition that limits your ability to endure basic training and to assimilate into the military, right? So the fifth one says that you must not have a criminal record. And I guess that's obvious in a sense, right? And then we now talk about number 6, which is talking about height. So it says men should be at a minimum height of 5 feet and 3 inches, which is 160 meters. And at the very least, women should be 5 feet tall, or 152 meters at the minimum. So you can be as tall as your ancestral gene pool, and not shorter than 5'3" for men and 5 feet for women. And then weight, okay? So the minimum weight for men is that they shouldn't be anything below 54.55 kilograms, okay? Or 120 pounds. And women should not be anything less than 50 kilograms, which is 110 pounds, okay? Very, very important to note. And you'd understand why that is a requirement once you understand what you have to put on your back on every given day to be able to fulfill the obligations of basic training. Number 8 goes to talk about female candidates must not be pregnant at the time of recruitment and during the entire duration of the training. Yeah, I'm telling you, if you're pregnant, you're gonna lose that baby. There are no two ways about it, because you literally can't sit out basic training. You cannot. And there's no pregnancy that can survive basic training, like for real. Because even as a woman, I wasn't pregnant, and yet, like, on some occasions, I was like, I could feel my womb trembling, especially during the firing of some big weapons. Like, yeah, I think it's an experience only women can speak about. Like it's like an earthquake of the uterus, and you just feel the trembling. So yeah, I'm sort of imagining if there's something there, it's over. But also there's a lot of crawling, jumping, rolling. Yeah, a pregnancy won't survive. Like, if you're thinking it's like any other sort of job, no, it's not. Like, no, that pregnancy won't survive for sure. So that condition is just, it's unchangeable, and it's for obvious reasons. So it says for specialist officers and tradesmen and women, if you recall, I told you these are the Kenyan men and women who are coming to offer a very specific service into the military that they have trained and qualified for and have been certified for, all right? Then, so you must have 2 years experience in the field of your specialization from the date of registration with the relevant regulatory/statutory body in Kenya. So, of course, that means if you're a lawyer, you have to be registered with the Law Society of Kenya. If you are a doctor, you understand what I'm saying, you know? So those bodies that register their members, you have to be in one. Okay, so let's go to B, that is talking about minimum academic qualifications. Take note, minimum, okay? So general service officers, acronymed as GSO candidates. Sorry, not candidates, cadets. I think it's the election season that has me like, yeah, but anyway. It is cadets, not candidates. So they must hold a minimum mean grade of a B plane in KCSE with a C plus in English, mathematics, and one's science subject. The training period for this category will cover 3 years, leading to a BSc, which is a Bachelor's of Science, in a degree in military science and security studies upon completion. So what does this mean? This means that, first of all, in line with the national requirements for qualification into university based on your KCSE, the Kenya Certificate of Secondary Education result, those standards still apply if you are registering to be a GSO, because part of your basic training now includes you being able to qualify to become a degree holder. So you must be one who has already met the national qualifications, and then now you have to be able to go through the training for 3 years, so that by the time of your completion, which is 3 years, you have that degree, and then you get commissioned, and then you come into giving service to the country as a general service officer, like the cadet life is over, okay? So number 2, we have general service officers, cadets, with undergraduate degrees, right? So it says must hold the minimum requirement to qualify as GSO cadets, like what we have said above, right? You have to have a minimum mean grade of a B plane with a C plus in English, mathematics, and at least one science subject. That's what that means, that you have to be able to have the minimum requirement to qualify as a GSO. And so you must have met the other qualifications as well, the ones for height and weight and nationality and criminal record, of pregnancy, of physical and mental fitness. You must have met those as well, okay? Then, my nose is running, I apologize. And then it goes on to say that you must be a degree holder of an undergraduate degree from a recognized university, institution in any of the disciplines listed in para 4B. Para 4B is like when they're talking about the kind of specializations that they need. And so the training period for this category will be 11 months, right? So let me interpret this. You're coming in as a general service officer, right? Cadet, a GSO cadet, okay? And you have just left high school, right? Or you left high school and you are not yet 26 years old, okay? You're above 18 and you haven't gone to university to qualify for any degree, right? You do the 3 years, right? 3. So that at the end of it all, you have a degree in military science and security studies. Now, you are also signing up as a general service officer, but you hold a degree from a recognized university, and you've actually finished and completed all the requirements, and you actually have the degree with you. So for somebody like you, you're not going to go and per se study to qualify for the what is it called? The military science and security studies degree, because you already have one. So you won't do 3 years, you'll do 11 months, okay? I hope that is clear. But all of you become commissioned officers in the end, and you become general service officers. Comprende? I hope that's clear. That part confuses people a lot, okay? Then you have number 3, which is specialist officers. Okay, so must hold the minimum requirement to qualify as a GSO cadet as above. Like, you must meet the requirements for adoption into the university, right? That's what that means. As a specialist officer, you must meet that and all the others that I've read above that have to do, once again, with weight, height, physical and mental health, nationality. You can't have dual nationality, you can't be pregnant, You have to meet all those things, okay? So, with an exception for chaplains and imams who must hold a mean grade of a C+ in KCSE. So it says that you must be a holder of an undergraduate degree from a recognized university or institution and be registered with the regulatory/statutory body where applicable in any of the disciplines in para 4C. So that basically talks about the specializations that have been asked for, whether it's nurses, teachers, psychologists, radiographers, dentists, psychologists, social workers, all that, all right? And the training period for specialist officers will be 6 months, okay? So, in summary, we have two types of officers. You have general service officers, you have specialist officers. Now, within the general service officers cadre, you have those that come in without a degree, and therefore you will take 3 years to qualify to be commissioned to become an officer. And then you have those ones that essentially come in with a degree in the specialization that they studied for and qualified for in university, and then they actually train for 11 months. Okay, that's the GSO. And then you have the specialists who have already qualified by the time they are asking to join the military. And that category of people train for 6 months. I hope that's clear. So that you know where you fall, what to expect, and what is required of you. Yeah, so that you don't have any anxiety about being confused or not knowing what to expect. And just saying to yourself that, I've had people ask me this in the inbox. They say, can I come in as a GSO, then I become a specialist, right? Or can I come in as a specialist and then I become a GSO, right? So that's a whole other topic for a whole other day. Because I'll just say there's a lot of paperwork. It's not even a guarantee or anything like that. It's just, stick to the requirements as they are. You'll have less of a problem. I apologize for all the noise, but the show must go on. So next we come to servicemen and women, general duty recruits. So you notice there's even a difference when you're talking about people who are going to get eventually commissioned. You're talking about cadets. When you are talking about those who are not eventually going to get commissioned, but just carry on as non-commissioned, you're talking about recruits. So it's a very big difference when you're reading it. But real life scenario, yeah. So anyway, it says servicemen and women general duty recruits must hold a minimum grade of a D plane in KCSE. Okay, I think that's very clear. Then tradesmen / women, the prospective candidates. The word candidate was used, so I wasn't very far off. It's okay. So prospective candidates willing to apply must satisfy the conditions and requirements given below. All right, so it says if you're a technician, you must have a minimum grade of a C plane in KCSE with a relevant diploma or above from a recognized institution and be registered with the relevant statutory bodies where applicable. So don't feel held back if you don't have some form of registration. It does say where applicable, so go for it. Go for it. Then B talks about artisans, and it talks about you have to be able to have a minimum grade of a D+ for KCSE, and you have either the relevant certificate with government trade test grade 2 or craft grade 2 from a recognized institution. The people who do this kind of work understand the grading system, yeah, 3, 2, 1, like that. So I don't need to like overemphasize the point, because if you know, you know, and you know because you do, right? Then C talks about the National Youth Service. Trained technicians and artisans who meet the above requirements are encouraged to apply. And of course, the above requirements here have to do with your KCSE qualification and the paperwork that proves your certification. Okay, so NYS people, go for it, go for it. Then you have constables. Now, constables are basically individuals who once served in the military and left for one reason or another. But of course, another cannot be dishonorable discharge. Let's begin from there. By another, I mean you didn't renew your color service, or you renewed your color service, but at some point you resigned and went about your business, and now you want to be able to come back, or you didn't renew your color service and now you want to be able to come back. Those are what constables are. The uniform is also different from everybody else. Yeah, point to note. So it says a retired Kenya Defence Forces service member or retired National Youth Service man or woman. That's the first qualification for you to make a constable. So either you were in the Kenya Defence Forces at some point or the National Youth Service at some point, okay? So you must be between the ages of 30 and 55 years old if you're in the KDF, and between 35 and 45 if you were in the National Youth Service. It's very important to take notes of those dates. And then C, you must possess a discharge certificate with a minimum rating of very good in conduct. And then the final one, you must have served for 9 years color service and retired honorably from the KDF, essentially what I had mentioned. So if you look, every time there's that advertisement, it will give an array of the different specializations that are, you know, being explored, and you can see where you fit and you can make the decision. And so always at the end of that advertisement, there will always be the person you should write to. It always is the Assistant Chief of Defense Forces for Personnel and Logistics, yeah? This is essentially a Lieutenant General, yeah. Is it? Yes. That's the person who basically you write to, and then it goes down the different departments and ranks for the purposes of CV. So at the very end of it all, it says that you have to be able to detail your curriculum vitae, which should include your height, your height and weight, clear photocopies of all your relevant academic certificates, your professional body membership certificate, and current national ID card attached with your application. Okay? So I think what is not mentioned here that I think is very important to keep in mind, you must do a cover letter. Yeah? All applications must have a cover letter. I mean, I know it's not being put here, but as someone who was once in the selection process, but you know, just generally the way you know things should work, always do a cover letter, because you know, a cover letter is like you're showing out. A cover letter is the one that's saying, this is who I am, and this is why you need me, this is what I can do for you, and you know, this is why we make such good partners. So do include a cover letter over your CV, and make sure you have all your other attachments that are done, because the process is very, very rigorous, and like there's no escaping it. You can't just say, labda hawataona, maybe they won't notice. No. So be thorough with your application. Make sure you meet all the requirements. Make sure that you give your application to somebody else to just look through it, so that they can see whether you have met all the requirements. Have a checklist and just check them off. Just check them off, and have somebody else also check them off to just see that you have been able to adhere to all the requirements that have been put there, because there are so many people competing for very limited spaces. So there's not a lot of patience for somebody who was nonchalant with their application. So don't be that person. If you really want to do this, apply yourself, right? Apply yourself. So you'll always find where you're supposed to write to, who you're supposed to write to, and that essentially happens. So what else should I mention here? Yeah, so it will usually come with like a breakdown of where in all parts of this country you will have like the GSO, and this is so important. I think this is so important to mention, because there are those who send their applications and go through like a sorting process, and there are those people who have to like show up physically with these requirements. I think it's so important to mention that. Oh my gosh. Okay, so when you're talking about General Service Officer Cadets, GSO that is, and General Service what does this thing say? General Service Officer Cadets and General Service Officer Cadets undergraduate degree holders. So there is like a whole itinerary of where the recruiters are going to be everywhere in this country at a particular day, at a particular time, at a particular location. And that is in the newspaper, like it is published in the newspapers, right? And so I hope you haven't forgotten the requirements that are for GSOs and GSOs with undergraduate degrees. You must have those when you show up in your respective recruiting center based on where you live. You have to show up with those things in your hand. And then you must show up with rubber shoes. Please don't go with like leather shoes and moccasins. Those ones won't survive, because, you know, part of being able to see your suitability is about your physical fitness. And that is not a question of yes or no. It's about doing. So yeah, there is running involved. Then you have the general duty recruits and Defense Forces constable who are in the same category. You have to show up in that particular area of your relevance with your necessary documentation and of course with rubber shoes. So for specialists, once the application is made, so for specialists and tradesmen and women, the application is made through the office of the Vice Chief of Defense Forces for personnel and logistics. So a whole team sits down and selects people who are suitable, who are then shortlisted and published in the newspaper. So that means if you do make that application, I think you have to buy a newspaper like every other time from the time you apply so that you don't miss out. Or of course be registered for a virtual newspaper so that you don't miss out. I have a very interesting story about my situation because, to be honest, I never used to buy newspapers. That's like a thing for old people, isn't it? So one old person, my dad, who of course reads the newspaper every day, is the one who saw my name. And then I guess other old people who read newspapers like called him and he called me. Otherwise, how different history would have turned out. But there you go, you know, what is yours is yours. So when that selection process happens and the publication of the names is done in the local newspapers, it comes with instructions of the particular day and time and location where you're supposed to show up for like the next level of your selection process, okay? So it doesn't end there. Even for like GSOs, with or without undergraduates, with tradesmen and women, it doesn't end on the very first day you go for the selection process. It's multi-tiered. And I say this because sometimes when people go there and then they're told, okay, so you have passed this particular stage, see you in this particular location at this particular day, because you're given letters. At that particular point, from then on, you're given letters, you're given calling letters. And so someone is like, yay, I snagged the job. And then you go out celebrating, you go, you get pregnant, you go, you don't use protection, you go, you get into a fight and end up in hospital. You just, you know, in the course of that celebration, you engage in activities that compromise your ability to pass the next selection process, because checks and measures are put in place to make sure that the minimum requirements that have been published are maintained up until the very end. And the very end here means till the day you pass out, your pass out parade. So if any time during the first selection process and after like one day before the end of the 3 years, or one day before the end of the 11 months, or one day before the end of the 6 months, you know, or one day before the end of just even a few hours to your pass out parade, to your commissioning board, you compromise those requirements in one way or another, I promise you, you are out. Ooh-wee. There's no way of emphasizing this in any other way but saying you will be let go and everything will have been for nothing. And I've seen that happen, and I promise you, it cuts deep. It cuts deep, and it just doesn't cut deep for the person who's been cut. That cut, it cuts deep up until the family level. Yani, even the grandparents feel it, you know, because it is a big deal when, you know, people get into the military. It's not for everyone. It's a big, big deal. So just be aware that there are no guarantees. There are no guarantees whatsoever. So I hope that has helped. And man, I don't want to say that I should not get any more questions. Kenyans are Kenyans. But I hope that they will now be of a different nature, right? Because that's the thing about information, isn't it? You provide information and it brings out more questions. It is our nature. So it is all right because it's our nature. But I hope that has been helpful. Do take care of yourself and continue doing what you need to do to promote your mental health and wellness. Have a good day. Ciao.